Dana White's Contender Series. This is Season 7, Episode 1, and I couldn't be more excited to have a new season of Dana White's Contender Series. Typically, we have 5 fights lined up for Tuesday night, but one was actually recently scratched, so we have 4 fights this Tuesday night. I'm John Kelly. Let's hear the picks. And before we get into the first matchup here, you guys know that I have to bring in the man, the myth, the legend, the guy behind the scenes who has been plotting for the past 12 months, chomping at the bit for the new season of Contender Series. It's my guy, Don Kelly. I'll let him take it from here. And we're going to get things started in the bantamweight division as Payton Talbott comes in as a minus 130 favorite with Reyes Cortes on the comeback at plus 110. And this is a fun matchup. We'll start on the Talbott side. He's a 5-0 prospect fighting out of Nevada. He trains out of Reno, and of those 5 wins, all of them have come by knockout. Now, there's some positive and some negative on the Talbott side. For starters, the positive things, he's big for the division, he seems to have good cardio, he's always looking to pressure his opponents, and he seems to be very durable as well. Now, those are the good things. The bad, the main one being his striking defense, because he eats a lot of shots. And that's one thing that I'll probably talk about with a few of these prospects across this entire season, but particularly with Talbott, I mean, he honestly resembles a young Chase Hooper in terms of his striking defense. He eats a ton of shots, which doesn't make you feel comfortable, but the positive is he really just stays with that pressure. Despite eating a couple shots, he's going to give those shots back, and he breaks a lot of his opponents later in fights. Now, he hasn't really fought anybody that's worth anything, but that's kind of a theme with Contender Series, so you can't really knock him too much for that. Now, where I think Cortes is going to have some advantages. For starters, he fought on Contender Series 2 seasons ago against Christian Rodriguez. He lost a decision there, but Christian Rodriguez is kind of a stud now in the UFC. Definitely one of the better young prospects in the division. So I don't want to knock Cortes too much for that one. And I just think he's going to have multiple advantages here. I think he's the better boxer. You know, he typically does accept the back foot and let his opponents pressure him. So I do think Talbott is going to be the one moving forward. But Cortes is a very good counter striker. He's got a strong check left hook that he's going to look for repeatedly. He's got good calf kicks as well. I could just envision Talbott trying to pressure him and just getting peppered with those counter shots of Cortes. And even though Talbott does have a little bit of a wrestling background, he's more of a striker. He wants to strike. And I actually think Cortes is probably more likely to land takedowns here. So I just think at this stage, Cortes is more proven. I think he's the overall better fighter, and I think he gets his hand raised here. I expect it to go a full 15 minutes. We're going Cortes by decision, and I like the plus money on the Cortes side. And next fight up, this one's in the heavyweight division as Caio Machado takes on Kevin Szaflarski. Caio Machado's currently a minus 140 small favorite with Szaflarski on the comeback at plus 120. And we'll start on the Machado side. This is a guy who I do think is a pretty solid prospect. 7-1, fighting out of Canada. Of those 7 victories, 6 of them have actually come in the first round, and the one that didn't went all 5 rounds. So he's one of the few guys on this season that's actually been tested across 25 minutes, which doesn't happen very often with a lot of these young fighters, but he seems to be a very well-rounded prospect, high-level kickboxing background. He's got a black belt in Muay Thai, black belt in kickboxing, and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. So he's just got multiple ways to beat you. He's a good striker, very athletic for the heavyweight division. He moves very well, and he's got some grappling credentials as well. So I do kind of like Machado here. I just think he's the better all-around fighter, the better athlete. I think he's got most of the upside in this matchup because Szaflarski, while he does have a good record himself at 11-1, he's fought most of those guys on the Polish regional scene, so he actually only has a handful of wins over guys with a winning record. So the competition generally poor on both sides, definitely lower on the Szaflarski side. And Szaflarski, in terms of the matchup, you know, he's more of kind of a point fighter. Yes, he's got a little bit of power like most heavyweight guys do, but he's really content to fight behind his jab. He's light on his feet, despite not looking like the most athletic dude. He moves pretty well for the division, and he's shown he's capable of not really grappling a ton, but certainly holding guys up against the fence, mixing in a takedown or two, just making it one of those grimy style of fights. I just don't think that's going to work against Caio Machado, who I kind of think is better in almost every area than Szaflarski here. I think he can win on the feet, and I think if it does go to the mat, I favor his grappling there. So I like Caio Machado as a small favorite. I think he should be a bigger favorite. It's likely going to be an individual bet for me, but he's also going in the DGen parlay as well. Which brings us to our next fight in the lightweight division. This one's currently lined as a pick'em as Tom Nolan takes on Brogdan Grad in this banger matchup. And this is my bet for fight of the night, because I think there is basically no chance that this fight doesn't deliver in terms of entertainment value and excitement, because we really have two guys that I think are very talented. We have Tom Nolan, who's a 5-0 prospect fighting out of Australia. He's a friend of Casey O'Neill. He spent part of this camp at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas as well. Of his 5 victories, 3 of them have come by knockout. He fights out of the southpaw stance. He's got very powerful leg kicks, very powerful knees and elbows when he gets inside in the clinch, and he loves to end his combinations with those knees. Once he closes that distance, he's beating you up to the body, he's going to finish it with a knee almost every single time. He does that in just about all of his fights. And he's also got some vicious ground and pound if he can get to a dominant position on the mat. He holds a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we have seen him get taken down by solid wrestlers on the regional scene, and he can be controlled as well. And then on the flip side, Brogdan Grad is an 11-1 fighter fighting out of Austria, and of his 11 victories, 7 of them have come by knockout. He comes from a high-level kickboxing background, and I cannot overstate how powerful this dude is. I mean, he is absolutely shredded for his size, and that's one thing I bring up because he is going to be giving up size in this matchup. Tom Nolan is going to be about 5 inches taller. He's going to have a couple inches of reach advantage, but I do think the power advantage is clearly on the Grad side. I think he's more technical on the feet as well, and he's also the better submission grappler. He holds a brown belt as well, but I actually think he's more dangerous if the fight were to hit the mat. Now, the one concern with Brogdan Grad is because he's so powerful and so explosive, we see it time and time again with these guys. When they're throwing everything into their strikes early, they typically can't keep that pace over 15 minutes if they don't get that early finish. And that's what I think is probably going to happen here, because if he can't get that finish, I think he's going to fade after round 1. So I think Tom Nolan, that body work, if he can avoid getting knocked out by something big from Grad early, I think that body work, those knees in the clinch, it's really going to pay off as the fight gets extended. I think Nolan has the better cardio, and I think that's probably how this fight plays out, as Grad will likely need to clip him and finish him early, and if he doesn't, I think Nolan takes over later and probably gets the finish. So we're going to slightly lean with my guy Tom Nolan to get his hand raised here, and he's the third pick in the DGen parlay. Which brings us to our main event in the middleweight division, as Lucas Fernando comes in as a minus 275 currently, with Cesar Almeida on the comeback at plus 235. And Lucas Fernando is the former middleweight champion over in LFA. He's a 9-1 prospect fighting out of Brazil. Of those 9 wins, 5 have come by knockout, and he comes from a high-level kickboxing background. He's actually a former member of the Brazilian national kickboxing team, and you see it with his striking. He's very long for the division, but he uses that length very well. He's got good combinations, heavy leg kicks. He's also shown that he can mix in a little bit of wrestling as well, although that's not his primary game plan, because he's very good on the feet, forward pressure, mixes in the body work as well. So I think this kid's pretty good, to be honest with you. I have a hard time seeing him lose in this fight against Cesar Almeida, who also comes from a kickboxing background. This guy fought for the middleweight title over in Glory, and he has a win. It was about 10 years ago, but he has a win over Alex Pereira, who we just saw fight Jan Blachowicz last weekend. But in terms of his MMA experience, it's very, very poor. I mentioned the kickboxing pedigree, but in MMA, I mean, he's fighting the absolute tomato cans on the regional scene, and it's really just not that impressive. He's got a couple knockout victories, but you can't really put too much into that because the competition has been so poor. I think he's still very green in terms of MMA. I think his defensive grappling is entirely unproven. I think he's also going to be at a disadvantage on the feet with the size and the speed of Fernando, and I think that's what's going to be the difference here. So I think Fernando is eventually going to get to him and probably get the finish here. So he's going to round things out in the DGen parlay. So quick recap for the DGen parlay. In the first fight of the night, we're going Reyes Cortes, the slight underdog. I think he's just more experienced and better at this stage in his career. I think the defense of Talbott is going to be an issue, so we're going Cortes by decision there. In the second fight, I like the small favorite, Caio Machado. I just think he's much better in basically every area than Kevin Szaflarski, and I expect that to show out in this matchup. In the third fight, I like my guy, the Australian, Nolan. I think both of these guys are very exciting. Wouldn't hate it if we eventually saw both of them in the UFC just because they put on very exciting fights, but I really think Grad is finish reliant early, and I think the body work is going to pay off for Nolan. I think Grad's eventually going to fade if he doesn't get that early finish, and Nolan takes over late. And then, of course, in the main event, I like Lucas Fernando, the high-level kickboxer. I just think he's going to show that he's the younger, bigger, fresher fighter in this matchup, and I think he gets the job done. So 4 fights this Tuesday night, guys. As always, appreciate you watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.